Ruth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a joy to be here.
So begin us on this journey and help us understand what the heck is metapsychiatry.
Well, actually, it's a spiritual teaching, but you wouldn't know that from its name, would you?
No.
So meta means beyond psychiatry. So Dr. Hoare was someone who went beyond the traditional thinking of psychiatry and in fact discovered the metaphysical understanding of man, who is created in the image and likeness of God, we could say, or that individual that reflects what reality really is. So metapsychiatry is the teaching that evolved out of his many long years of practice when he was seeking to alleviate the suffering of his patients and his students, who then came from around the world because they were interested in spiritual understanding.
So in a way it's mental health, but mental health from the context of we're part of God, or God is a part of our lives, an integral part of who we are. And that changes the way we perceive who we are and how we are in the world, what we do, what our purpose is.
Yes, exactly. So to understand ourselves as spiritual beings rather than just mere human beings is really the purpose of metapsychiatry.
And beyond psychological beingness, right? That's the psychiatry part of it.
That's right. That's right. That could be called the human condition. And the other is divine reality. So seeing the difference between being a human being and a spiritual being, or the difference between the human condition and divine reality, is what we teach in metapsychiatry.
Well, that all sounds very esoteric up there. So help us understand this by talking about your story. How did you get involved with all of this?
Yes, actually, it's a very interesting story. I discovered metapsychiatry in graduate school in 1978. And with the publication of Dr. Hoare's first two books called Dialogues in Metapsychiatry and Existential Metapsychiatry, which were assigned to us to be read and as our homework. And I went home, started reading the dialogues, and in it I came across a word called PAGL, P-A-G-L. P for the peace, A for assurance, G for gratitude, and L for love. And I said, oh my goodness, that's what happened to me. About a month beforehand, I had been in a desperate situation. I was in the process of divorce, and in the midst of that, my husband lost his job, and we lost our home, and we didn't have any money, and we had two children, and I thought, where are we going to go, and what can we do? And it was so depressing that I actually was in a full-fledged depression. And everything I tried didn't work. Nothing worked. I couldn't figure out how to solve this problem. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Where's the money going to come from? And this went on for months. And finally, in desperation, I turned to God, earnestly, sincerely.
What does that mean, to turn to God?
Well, I didn't know what it meant at that time, but you know, when you're in the suffering state, the last thing you try is God. So I said, okay, God, if there really is God, then reveal yourself to me, because I really don't know. I've been brought up in a church, but I never really understood what God was. So I prayed and said what I just said, if you really exist, then reveal yourself to me. And 7 days later, the most amazing thing happened. I felt this incredible peace flowing down upon me from above, and it enveloped me. And I heard a voice say to me, a voiceless voice, say, you are not to want anything. Everything, everywhere is already all right. And I was so assured by that voice. I knew that was God. And a sense of peace and assurance and gratitude and love all came to me. And this was not something that I was able to articulate very easily. In fact, it took me a long time to be able to express what had happened, because it sounded so bizarre. And but the fact was that it left me with complete assurance that everything was all right, and I didn't have to want anything. And from that moment on, the depression was lifted. I was no longer anxious. I wasn't afraid. All of those feelings absolutely dissolved in that short period of time when this occurred.
Do you think it was as simple as, or as complex, however you want to say it, as moving from trying to figure out what it was that you had to do to fix this problem, to that letting go, turning to God, which opened up this realization of who you really are?
Yes, but I didn't really understand that at the time. It's that what happened to me was real. that was what was true about it. And I explained it as I knew that was God, but it didn't sound like the God that I'd been brought up with. I was thinking of God as a person, some kind of person out there in beyond the sky.
Some sort of helpful being that's going to do something for you.
Yeah, but it was really more an anthropomorphic idea of God in the image of man. And that just didn't make sense to me as an adult. So I kind of turned away from church and God. But at this point, I knew that that is God. That's what God is. So to me, after a month of living in this state of PAGL, where I was totally unconcerned about anything, it just seemed ridiculous to somebody who didn't know what I'd gone through. But to me, it was extremely real. There was no question about it.
Well, there must have been people who must have thought you had really gone insane, because here you were in the midst of a lot of problems.
Yes.
And you went into a kind of a bliss state, right?
Yes, I was in pure bliss.
And so from someone else's perspective, it might say, but Ruth, you're not dealing with reality here.
Yes, yes. My friends used to say, why aren't you going out and looking for a place to live? And I said, because I don't have any sense that I need to do that. I was living in such a state of peace constantly, all day, every day, and somehow I knew that I didn't have to do that, and it didn't make sense, of course, to somebody else looking upon it, but to me, it was the right thing to do, because I wasn't led to do anything else. And this is not a passive state, which is the way most people might think of it, but a very conscious awareness that there is PAGL in my, well, I didn't use the word then, that there was a sense of peace and assurance. So I went with that.
That everything was really all right.
Yes.
Even though it didn't appear that way to other circumstances or other ways of looking at it, you knew that everything was really okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the amazing thing that happened was that 5 days before we were to move out of that house, which had already been sold, because we had been renting it, it had been sold, and we had no place to go. And here were 2 children to feed and to clothe and to house and to care for, and no place to go, and I wasn't the least bit concerned, and a phone rang. And a woman said, Ruth, I understand that you're looking for a place to live and a place where you might have an office of your own, because that's what I was looking for. And she said, I have such a place, and would you be interested in it? And I knew immediately that this is right. There was just a sense of peace around it, a sense of, well, PAGL, I later learned. And I even was so sure of it that I said to her, well, I can't come right now because I'm off to work. Could I come at the end of the day? And she hesitated for a moment, and she said, oh, yes, that's fine. Please come at the end of the day. And later she told me she had about 25 names on her waiting list, and she didn't know what made her wait, because she could easily have rented the house right away. But she waited, and as soon as I came to the house, I realized, yes, that is it. That's the right place for us. And then she told me what it cost. And let's say it cost $600. And I had figured out in my budget, I had only $100 to pay for a place to live. And I knew that didn't make any sense whatsoever. And I had this little battle going on in my mind, so to speak, where my left brain was saying, you can't afford this. What are you doing? And there was such a sense of PAGL around it that I knew I had to do it. There was no question about it. But I did notice that this other little thought kept coming in and intruding itself upon me. And I just turned away from it, of course, and went and signed the papers. And the amazing thing was that at the end of the month, I made exactly enough money to pay for the house. And the following month, I made more. So it was a turn of events it changed my whole life, that moment. So that was a huge, profoundly spiritual awakening that had occurred, and transformation.
Well, so in the space of a month, you had this realization. You went from the depths of despair into this realization, and then the actual manifestation, in a way, a practical result of this new way for you of experiencing life all at once.
Yes, all at once. It just happened, though, you know. I can't take credit for any of that. It's by the grace of God it happens. But it is also something that's interesting to learn about, and that's what happened when I went to school, back to school, and found the word PAGL. And Dr. Hora described it in the book as a criterion by which we can know whether we are on the right track in life and whether we're going in the right direction whenever we're making choices and decisions. And I was amazed that he was able to articulate it so clearly, so simply. Not only that, but put it into an acronym, peace, assurance, gratitude, and love, PAGL, that I called him up on the telephone. I located his phone number and called him on the phone and asked him if I could come and talk with him. And he gave me an appointment for the following week. And that's what began the 17 years of weekly dialogues with him, which was absolutely the most great, wonderful blessing of my life, to have the privilege of studying with such an enlightened individual, and such a gracious man, and compassionate individual, non-judgmental, and a brilliant teaching.
Well, I want to go back to something that you talked about in your experience,
Mm-hmm.
which seems to me to just tell the whole story in a way. And it's at that point where you had to decide about whether to take the apartment or not, or the house when it was more expensive. And I think we all know that difference, but maybe you could even articulate it a little bit more. We know the difference between wanting something and having it have friction or anxiety with it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we know the feeling of wanting. You wanted that place. You knew it was right.
No,
But
actually,
it was
that's
different,
not true.
right? Okay,
No.
so talk about the difference
No.
there, because that's a fine line.
Yes, it is a fine line, and I think it's the result of that voiceless voice that came to me, which says you are not to want anything. So at that moment, I literally gave up wanting, and I never thought about such a thought in my life before. You just go around wanting things from time to time; it's normal. But that was called to my attention. You are not to want anything. So I said, okay, I give up. I don't want anything from now on. So you tell me, Lord, you guide me, God, whoever you are, you bring to me what I need, because I don't know. I don't know how to solve the problem myself. So that's the key, is giving up the desire to get what we want, giving up all desires and allowing divine ideas to reveal themselves to us. And they, in fact, do take care of us. That's what happens. That's the most amazing thing that I've ever learned in my life, that there is this divine guidance, and it's always available to us, but we don't usually turn toward it because we're so interested in trying to do what we think we should do or what we want to do. So
but the divine guidance you're talking about is not this force that's way out there, far away from us, that is either going to give us what we want or not, or take care of us or not, and some days take care of us or not. You're talking about an actual awareness that is visceral, the PAGL, that is something that is realizable. I don't even know the right words to say, but say what it is.
It's very difficult to describe it. Yeah, it's definitely, it's within us. You see, that's the thing. I'd never been aware of it before, but one of the things that I learned about PAGL is that it is our essence. It is our essential nature. We are peace and assurance, gratitude and love. But usually we're so busy thinking that we know how to proceed in life that we're not aware of the fact that our true nature is these spiritual qualities, what we call spiritual qualities or spiritual values. So to be aware that that is available to us because it's already in us, it's already around us, it's everywhere, we live in it, is what is so amazing to see. We can live in this state of consciousness which is filled with PAGL. And when we do, then we begin to hear ideas that are right for us, that seem to be needed from moment to moment.
Well, you make it sound like all we have to do is sit in this room and pray and be in a good state of mind, and then everything will come to us. We can get apartments when we need to, or things like that. And I don't know, it just sounds so outrageous.
It is outrageous, actually, but it is also very real. And it's not a passive state. I think that's what we're all afraid of, is it sounds like we're just being passive, that we're not going to do anything to help ourselves, but this is not a passive state. It's a very conscious awareness that there is within us, that actually our true nature, I don't even want to say within, because it is what we are. We are this state of peace. We are this state of assurance. We are grateful. We are loving, but we're not aware of it most of the time.
So is this a religion, or what's it seems like that you're talking about such a religious thing about God and divine reality, and so how does this fit into the whole religious spiritual
It sounds like religion to many people, and of course it's just not unique to religion, but it's actually a spiritual perspective of life, because the spiritual is a whole other realm of existence, which does not belong to any one particular religion, is found in religion, but exists on its own. It's not man-made, whereas we tend to think of religion as man-made, or as something that it's an institution in the world. But spirituality is not located anywhere. It's not an institution. It doesn't have a hierarchy. I mean, there are many differences between the two, but rather than getting off into that at the moment, I'd really like to just give you an example of another experience that is quite profound that happened to one of our students. A woman from Switzerland who has been living in the United States for a long, long time, and her children are grown and they're living in Switzerland. Every summer she went back to Switzerland to visit with her children, and a few years ago she picked up the phone to make a reservation about 3 months ahead of time, and she had to hang up the phone because there was no PAGL around it. She was familiar at that time with this idea and seeking to live her life in accordance with PAGL. And every day she would pick up the phone and try to dial the airlines again. She'd hang up the phone. No PAGL around it.
Because it's just a sense that it wasn't right, or it wasn't harmonious, it wasn't in that state of flow, or PAGL, what you're talking about.
Right, in the flow, whatever words you want to use for it, but we like that idea of PAGL because it's very specific. There's a peace of mind there. There's an assurance. There's a sense of gratitude to know that there is this available to us. We're grateful for that. And to know that we are so loved, that we are protected. And so all of those are there. All of these are combined with PAGL, and plus the freedom that comes from knowing that there is something beyond ourselves that we can actually rely on. So she hung up the phone day after day, week after week. A couple of months this went on. And she finally said, obviously I'm not meant to go. This is not the right time for whatever reason she couldn't understand. But she followed, she paid attention to PAGL, and she therefore did not go through the reservation. And the amazing thing was that was the flight that went down over Nova Scotia. So she would have lost her life if she had not paid attention to that.
And for her, that wasn't the time, right?
Whatever it was that, happened there, the point is that she was protected. Now, can everybody be protected? Well, yes, that's the point here, that perhaps everyone on that plane would have been protected if they'd known about PAGL. I mean, who knows? I can't speculate about that. But the fact was that when we are guided by PAGL, then we discover that things have a tendency to work out for good in our lives, and we are protected.
Well, that's the radical thing that you're talking about, is that you're saying there is an experience, or there's a feeling, I don't know how you want it, there's an awareness of what really is, that is possible. And it's that awareness is really the state of being that we all long for, because it's a state of harmony, it's a state of peace, it's a state of lovingness. And so often in this world we think, well, I need to have the right house, or the right relationship, or the right job, or I need to get to go visit my children over in Switzerland in order to have that experience. But you're saying no. Metapsychiatry is saying no. It's actually the opposite way. That as you recognize what is, and the truth of that awareness right now of who you truly are, everything flows from that.
Exactly. So it's actually turning our world upside down and right side up. We're not going to ask anymore, what should I do? Because that's the wrong question. But what is needed is to get ourselves into a state of PAGL, which comes from learning to be still, mentally still, and to become aware of something that's deeper within us, where we find that state of PAGL. We say that it's located in consciousness, but where is consciousness located? Nobody seems to know. It's not in the brain. If you focus your attention on your knee, you can say, well, consciousness is in my knee, because that's where your awareness is. You're paying attention to that. So it's a mystery where consciousness is located. It's everywhere, actually. And it is infilled with all the spiritual qualities that are found in reality, because consciousness is part of reality. That is what we are.
Well, this is part of the mystical traditions from thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so what is the great contribution of metapsychiatry, do you think, to this, or from Dr. Hora? What is this contribution right now that you think is so important? Well,
one of the core ideas in metapsychiatry is this PAGL principle. So that I think that's a major contribution to world thought, actually. It's just putting into words that are appropriate for today, we could say.
It gives us a concept so that we can actually go to it. We can remember it. We can become more aware that this is what is.
Yes.
We don't have to meditate for 40 years in a monastery somewhere, right, in order to kind of get to a state of consciousness, because we're there already.
That's right, but we didn't know it. You see, this has been obscured from our awareness. It's, of course, there, but it's lying dormant. So one of metapsychiatry's purposes is to educate us, to help us to become more spiritually aware, spiritually awake. And that, of course, is a wonderful thing, because the more aware we are, the more we are protected, the more we discover that there is this force, this power that exists, that is governing our consciousness when we let it. And PAGL is the sign that we're in the flow, that we're in the right place. So we don't have to sweat so much about what direction to go in our life. What, should we take this job? Should we marry that person? Should we go here? Should we go there? What's the right home? We can let go of everything that we want and learn to rely on this wonderful thing called PAGL.
So how do you manage that? Let's talk us through that. So someone is just hearing this, and yes, you're saying this is who you are, but they're not aware of it. What are some of the first ways or steps or things you might suggest that help people get interested in that, or take those steps, whatever that would be?
Well, one thing is to say to people, have you ever been inspired suddenly out of the blue, and you knew something that you didn't know a moment before, and it just is exactly what you needed? Well, that's it. The divine idea comes to you, comes to your attention. And we all have those experiences. In a very simple way, you go into the refrigerator to look for something for dinner. You really don't have in mind what you're going to serve that night, what you're going to prepare for dinner. And you see this and you see that, and all of a sudden these ideas come to you about, oh, put this together with that, and that will taste good. And actually, out of what you thought was nothing, because you had nothing you thought left in the refrigerator, comes this beautiful dinner. Well, where did those ideas come from?
They were inspired, right?
Yes.
From our own natural creativity.
Exactly. So it's within us already. It's already there, waiting to be tapped. And the best way to have those experience, or those awarenesses happen more often, is to be in a state of peace and assurance that there is always the right idea available to us. And
so rather than opening up the refrigerator thinking, oh my gosh, there's nothing to eat, and we can't go out, and it's going to be horrible, and everybody's going to go hungry tonight, you go in saying, oh, what is there here tonight? What can I put together? What
will come to mind? What is going to reveal itself? So it's a constant appreciation for everything that is going on in your life. It's always new. It's always fresh. It's never stale.
And so it allows this kind of creativity. It's about being interested in what you want to have happen, like a good meal, create a good meal.
Yes.
And then the divine ideas or the inspiration begins to come into focus, right? It just drops in.
Yeah, it's a perspective, isn't it, on life?
It is a perspective.
It's changing our perspective and seeing that we're not this suffering little human being.
Right.
Who has to figure everything out for themselves. What should I do? Where should I go? But actually, there is a divine source available to us, which is the source of inspired ideas. And they're already there, and they'll be available to us when we pay attention and when we're interested in hearing them.
So it's a way of life, right? It's a way of life that's, like you say, it's positive. It's recognizing that everything's okay right now.
Everything everywhere is already all right, which sounds absolutely insane when
given
you look
all
around
the
the
troubles
world.
Of the world.
Exactly. But in divine reality, everything is already all right. Not in the world. In the world, there is suffering. We're not saying that there is not such a thing. But if, on an individual basis, we can see that we already have everything that we need, then let those ideas come to us. They will guide us. They will help us to overcome the problems that we are seeing in the world. But there's not enough interest in peace. People say they're interested in peace, but are they peaceful? Are they living a peaceful life? That's an important thing to see. So I think the whole world would benefit from this principle if it were more widely known.
Yes, it's living from that perspective that we're part of something much larger, and something that is very loving, and something that is very present, and that it has this intelligence, right?
Yes.
This intelligence that we are part of.
Yes.
And we can, and that will flow through us as needed.
When needed.
When needed,
moment by
needed.
moment by moment. You know, it's not something in advance. It's something that happens moment by moment. So that's what we have to realize too. We don't have to try to figure out things in the future. It's just right now in this moment. Can I see what really is, or am I not seeing what really is?
And we know that because if we're tense or frustrated or agitated in any kind of way, we know we're not really seeing clearly.
Exactly.
But when we can go to that place of PAGL, peace, love, and assurance, we know it's right.
That's right.
Well, Ruth, on that note, our show is over for this day, but I think you've really laid a great groundwork for the rest of our conversations.
Well, it's been a joy to do so with you, Nancy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. This is Nancy Rosanoff with The Listening Place saying bye for now.